As the owner of that black building, I apologize that I didn't consult you about the color. We spent $12 million renovating that building, so ripping it down is an option, but I will definitely look at a color chart. The intent was to make it look like New York City, Tribeca, so we went to Tribeca, we went to Soho, and there's a lot of hip black buildings, so I apologize. That's not my speaker time, is it? Yes. Are you counting that? I got to speak quickly too, because I have all of 10 minutes.
You're on.
Is that really my speaker time? Yes. Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay. Thank you. Thank you to the members of City Council for allowing me to be here this evening and share my vision for a brighter Allentown with you. I hope you all have received the binders I sent each of you outlining my positions on 14 different issues, including 12 things I would do in the first 30 days if I am selected as mayor. I ran for mayor because I want Allentown to be the city I know it can be, a safe, clean, and prosperous city where every child gets a quality education, and one in which our government operates with integrity, honesty, and transparency. You'll find a list of the ethics reforms I would propose in your binders. I was born and raised here in Allentown and have built 2 large businesses here. Throughout my 30 years in business, I have learned a few things which I think are imperative for the future success of Allentown. 1, put the right people in their jobs and get out of their way. Let them do what they do. Micromanaging is an attribute of a poor CEO. However, each person must have benchmarks for success and held accountable to achieve those benchmarks. 2, communicate with all of the stakeholders, no matter the issue. Get everybody at the table, listen to their ideas and concerns, pros and cons, and then make a decision, right or wrong. We have to move forward. The biggest problem in any organization is indecisiveness, paralysis by analysis. 3, constantly streamlining, eliminating waste can never stop. 4, set tangible goals for the organization, and then outline step by step how we're going to achieve those goals. From the outset, one of the principal obligations of the next mayor will be to restore the morale, energy, and sense of purpose and commitment to every employee who works for the city. I will work diligently to ensure that everyone knows that they are respected and that their work is appreciated and meaningful. We want a work environment in which everyone looks forward to coming to work and actually has fun. To that end, within the first 30 days, I will go to each department within the city government and meet with all of the employees, not just the department heads. I want to go to them and not have them come to me, because I want to make an effort to understand their concerns, their issues, and their ideas. I want to let them know that I'm here to listen and to make their lives better every day. I will also share with them my hopes and dreams and enthusiasm for Allentown's future. Before making the decision to run for mayor, I took the Allentown city budget and gave it to my finance guys and accountants and asked them to go through every line and come back to me with an honest assessment of the financial condition of Allentown. Regrettably, the picture is bleak. Although the prior administration would often say that we have a balanced budget, or at times even a surplus, that simply is not true. Allentown has an $8 million deficit. In the finance section of the binders I gave you, I've provided you with a breakdown by fund of the true revenues and expenditures so you can see exactly where that number is coming from. The next mayor will face a very difficult financial picture and must bring the knowledge of finance and a background in financial forecasting and analysis to guide us through it. Running a city may not be entirely like running a business, but it's very similar to running a business. It's forecasting, budgets, negotiations, personal matters, to name a few. There's an old expression, money isn't important unless you don't have it. Everything we hope to accomplish as a city, everything we hope to provide our citizens to make their lives better, costs money. And many of our problems can be resolved if Allentown has a healthier balance sheet and a profit and loss statement. Consider the following: crime. There's no substitute for more police on the street, but it costs money. I met with the local 302. They need more firefighters. We have fewer today than we did 12 years ago, while the city has grown. They need a second aerial truck. We have one, and Bethlehem has 3. It seems to me that if we ask these folks to put their lives on the line for us, we owe them every tool to ensure that they get home safely each night. But it costs money. We must get rid of the 1,000 blighted buildings in Allentown. If you live in a block that has a blighted building, you understand that it is a cancer. It attracts nothing but drugs, vandalism, crime, and gangs, but getting rid of them costs money. Our parks are crumbling. Money. Improving our failing infrastructure and making our streets cleaner all costs money. And simply put, we don't have it. As anyone who balances their checkbook knows, there are only two ways to balance a budget: cut expenses or increase revenues. For expense reduction, there is no substitute for detailed analysis. I will go line by line through Allentown's expenses with each department head and eliminate all waste. However, 70% of Allentown's expenses are related to police, fire, and EMS and their pensions. And as I just explained, Allentown needs to spend more money on those areas, not less. On the revenue side, property taxes and EIT cannot be increased. Our property taxes are far too high, creating an unfair burden on our elderly and young couples and putting Allentown at a competitive disadvantage. In addition, those high property taxes and the graduation of the school district are suppressing property values such that Allentown collected less in property tax revenue in 2016 than it did in 2012. As I just mentioned, the school district, I think it could serve as an example, as an excellent example of what might be the fate of Allentown if we do not take bold initiative to get our financial house in order now. I'm sure that many of you read the article on the front page of Sunday's Morning Call explaining that the school district finds itself yet again with a $28 million deficit. Based upon that article, we understand that the deficit took them by surprise, despite the fact that the district had faced numerous budget shortfalls over the past decade. Most recently was a $15 million shortfall last year. They're now considering freezing salaries of teachers who are vastly underpaid as it is, and yes, you guessed it, raising taxes yet again. Keep in mind that when they raise taxes, it hurts all of us terribly because it increases taxes for all of the citizens of Allentown. And the outside consultant they hired for $59,000 told them, quote, that the district lacks a system to obtain accurate and timely information on its financial picture, end quote. If you remember back to your childhood and recall Charles Dickens' famous story, A Christmas Carol, let's think of ourselves as Ebenezer Scrooge and the school district as ghosts of Christmas yet to come. If Allentown does not start employing new 21st century financial modeling, forecasting, and budgeting, take an entirely different perspective on monetizing its assets, and take bold new initiatives, then I fear the school district is precisely what Allentown will look like in the future. That begs the question, if we cannot cut expenses dramatically and cannot increase taxes, how do we significantly improve the finances of this city? Do we have reason to hope? I think we have a great reason to hope and believe in our future, and this is one of the main reasons I ran for mayor. I want to bring a new level of sophistication to our finances to move boldly into the future. Allentown must change its financial thinking if it's to step forward. We have been given an unparalleled opportunity to revitalize our city with the NIS. That is arguably one of the most aggressive tax incentives in the entire United States. However, ask yourselves two questions. Why is it that only one guy is really taking advantage of it? And why is it when you drive 2 minutes or 20 minutes outside the Lehigh Valley, nobody's ever heard of it? Maximizing the growth of the NIS so that we all can benefit from the enormous tax dollars it can generate is the most urgent matter the next mayor will face. By the end of the next term, the NIS will be closing in on 20 years of viability. That may sound like a long time, but if developers and investors are to amortize their investment, they will need every one of those years. Once that period gets under 20 years, it will become far less attractive to investors and developers. And in addition to the potential for enormous added tax revenue from the NIS, the new businesses locating in the NIS will create jobs which are critical to the growth of our city. That is why, as the next mayor, I would be marketer in chief. I would get on the phone with every CEO who's considering locating here and let them know we're open for business and want to do whatever we can to get them here. And I would send out a request for proposal to marketing companies to create a world-class marketing campaign to advertise the NIS. Finally, we must, however, not just rely on the NIS. We must go well beyond that in our thinking. In the finance section of the binder I gave you, you will find a recent New York Times article. As you will see, this outlines 6 different cities which revitalized their downtown, and in so doing created enormous additional tax revenues for their city. This is proof that it can be done. When you read that article, please keep in mind that the NIS is far more aggressive, than any of the tax programs those cities have, and it is precisely the bold initiative which Allentown must undertake to secure its financial future. But also keep in mind that the developers they refer to are some of the biggest in the country. I know several of them. They are very smart, calculating, and ruthless. We need a mayor who can speak their language and hold their own with them intellectually and in negotiating skills. As someone who has been in 5 lawsuits with Donald Trump, I can tell you that those people eat their young. More to the point, we must bring an enhanced level of sophistication to Allentown's finances and monetizing its assets, as any $150 million business demands. Accordingly, if I am selected as mayor, I will have a comprehensive list of every asset which Allentown owns. I will then get a detailed financial analysis of ways in which we can maximize those assets. In so doing, I will request proposals from the best minds in finance, Goldman Sachs, McKinsey. We will review our assets, liabilities, and revenues and finances to come up with new initiatives to dramatically increase our revenues, lessen our expenditures, and restructure our debts. And I didn't get to finish, but so.
No, we're not doing applause.
We should.
Thank you. No, we shouldn't. All right, we'll open it up to council. Yeah, we'll go back to this side first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hyman, for coming over and giving us a clear understanding of what you think our city should do. I was happy to see you, I'm happy to hear you, happy to receive the information. And I would ask you, I mean, you touched a lot of the points that I wanted to ask earlier, but I will go further. You say we should not increase taxes, we should not, what's the other thing? 2 things you said, we should increase taxes and the EIT. We should not increase the EIT. Okay? And I tend to agree with you, by the way. What other ways, besides the names that you talked pretty much about, will we be able to get our finances in the city in a healthier situation than they are now?
Okay, well, as I said, limiting expenses can help to some extent, but is not going to resolve the problem. Allentown has a number of huge assets that I think can be realized and generate significant money for many years to come. I'll give you an example. Okay, so for instance, and I told some of you this previously. Probably on day 1, if you select me as mayor, I would call the governor and ask him to cancel the sale of the 200-acre state hospital land on the east side. That was sold to a gentleman in Doylestown who works out of his living room and bought it for $2 million. You have 200 acres in an urban setting. That is so immensely valuable that it could generate tax dollars for Allentown for many, many years to come. I think that in addition, the people of the east side have felt neglected for many years. I think that land can be an integral part of the east side to serve as their town center, potentially to give them the middle school they've long wanted. But certainly, we should be sending out requests for proposals to developers, because if that land ends up as yet another strip center with yet another Popeyes, we failed. That is just one. I have invested throughout Allentown, outside of this. I'm the only developer who has done anything of substance, notwithstanding the black building. And I've invested, frankly, I've invested close to $100 million in downtown Allentown, taking blighted buildings that were caving in on themselves that nobody wanted and turning them into, I believe, attractive, affordable apartments. As I've said before, I would live in any of my apartments. I know how to do it. I've done it. We have 1,000 blighted properties in Allentown. If anybody can create a roadmap for people on how to take city properties and make them income producing and put them back on the tax rolls again, I think I'm that guy. I've done it.
Just to follow up on that quickly, it almost reminds me of the current president that we have. So much investment in our city, and how will you manage to not have a conflict of interest?
Okay. In your binder on the last page, on the last section, I wrote concerns about me, and I felt it was important that I just address them head on. And one of them is a conflict of interest policy. I consulted 2 attorneys in Allentown, 2 very well-respected attorneys in Allentown, who drafted a conflict of interest policy. The reality is, as mayor, the only place I could potentially have a conflict of interest would be in code enforcement or some kind of building codes. To my mind, that's probably 1% of what the mayor does when you consider police, fire, streets, negotiations, contracts, when you consider all of the mayor does. But to that end, in that conflict of interest policy that you have in the binder, I said that I would be happy to allow City Council to appoint the head of codes. I'd be happy to have the head of codes report to the managing director, whomever City Council prefers. And I list about 6 different things there that pretty much would remove me from any potential for a conflict of interest. And if anybody ever felt there was a conflict of interest, I would simply refer it to the ethics board and let them make a determination one way or the other. And that would be a signed agreement that I would sign on day one. With that said, Mr. Garidi, I don't really believe there's a conflict of interest because I've also agreed to say that any building that is not presently under construction or has been built, I will put on the back burner until after I'm there. So the only possible conflict of interest would have been with building codes during the construction process, as far as I was concerned.
Thank you for answering that question. Very well done, so thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Hyman, we're facing a crisis right now. I shouldn't say a crisis, but we've lost a police chief now in 2 years' time, 2 chiefs, and we're also going to lose an assistant chief. What would your plan and process be for replacing them?
Okay, well, to also answer Mr. Zuckel's previous question, I think that in the absence of leadership, we do need to put in an interim police chief. I think we need somebody with a steady hand to guide that ship. And it can also be a trial period to see how the person does. When you walk through my company of 500-600 people, you'll find many people who have worked there for 20, 25, and 30 years. To my mind, Mr. Hendricks, that's the way you build a company, on good, long-term, loyal people. And that starts with the interview process. That starts with looking at their past, looking how much job hopping they had done, and what their aspirations are. I would do a national search for a police chief because I think we absolutely need the most talented person, but we need the most talented person who's going to stay here, somebody we can count on, somebody that we can build upon and have a police force that we're proud of. So while I would put in an interim police chief, I would do a national search for a police chief, but I would restrict it to somebody that I had a fairly good confidence level was going to be here for the long haul. We cannot afford this kind of turnover. I don't think it's beneficial for any of us, for the city, and for the rank and file who work for the police chief.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Hyman.
Good evening.
I see here in one of your points that you would like to meet with council, firefighters, and so on and so forth, and have open dialogue. Now, in the past, in our budget agreement last year, we were supposed to meet with the mayor and be included in a lot of the managing meetings and form committees to help us pick different directors and so on and so forth. This never happened. What are your thoughts on that, and you including council and having committees to help you find good workers?
Okay, well, first and foremost, let me say, and I have no corner on good ideas, so I actually stole one from Mr. Robinson where he said that we need to get the budget to council earlier, and I included that in my ethics reform. I think you have every right to review the budget, and frankly, even I put it in October, but even earlier than that. I had also written in my, in my cover letter that if you all do not believe that we can work together as a team, frankly, I'm not interested in the job. I only want to do this if we can work together for the betterment of Allentown. I want this to be a consensus. I want this to be not simply a check and balance, but I want to get all your ideas. Clearly, many of you have more experience than I as it relates to government, as it relates to the city, and I'm a quick learner, but I can learn. And there's a lot of things I don't know that I want to learn from you folks. So the answer, Ms. Affa, is I want to work as a team to resolve every problem that Allentown faces.
Thank you, Mr. Hyman.
I hope I addressed the question.
Yes, you did.
Mr. President, you got a quick one?
Well, there was a factual inaccuracy brought up that I think needs to be corrected for the benefit of the public.
Go ahead.
Mr. Hyman, you brought up the state hospital land, and actually there's 2 ways that the state can sell real estate that it owns. One is to the highest bidder, one is to a pre-selected bidder, but it's based off of usage. That's what the state has done with the state hospital land. The land has not been sold yet. They have to hold a series of public meetings on the east side. Council has to be involved for zoning changes since it's zoned as institutional. And if the end proposed use by the developer is not considered acceptable to the community, to the city, and to the state, the property will not be sold. Going back and starting over to try and get a better price for the state would actually result in what you talked about in another strip mall with the Popeyes. What the state's going through right now is a very deliberate, straightforward attempt to avoid just that.
I understand everything you've said. What I was referring to actually was Allentown buying that land. Now, whether Allentown buys that land and pays it as part of the development down the road, as opposed to coming $2 million out of pocket, that would be fine with me. But my call to the governor is, let's not leave this in the state hands. Let's leave this in city council, the mayor's hand, and the city of Allentown to decide who's going to develop it and what they're going to put there. That was my point.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure that the public understood.
Okay, thank you very much. Now you have 2 minutes to sum it up as to why.
I'll make it first. I'll make it fast and quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, please consider for a moment the impact on the quality of life of the average citizen in Allentown if we had an additional $20 or $30 million in revenue coming in each year. Consider the impact on all of those aforementioned issues which have plagued Allentown for so long: crime, fire, fire protection, parks, blight, etc. Ours would be a vastly different city, a safer city, a city of clean streets, gleaming buildings, and beautiful parks. A city our children deserve. This is attainable. This is why I ran for mayor. I would respectfully suggest that this is not a popularity contest, and this is certainly not a beauty contest. Please consider for a moment if you just inherited a $150 million business with 850 employees, and you were to hire the next CEO to deal with grave financial issues. Someone to resurrect that company, to manage it and grow it for you and your family. I would respectfully suggest that is the person you should hire. You hold the future of our children in your hands. I believe that it can be a bright future, but to attain that future, we need a bold new energy and thinking in City Hall. By now, I'm sure it's very clear to you that I'm not a politician. I'm just a guy from Allentown who wants to make things better. Please know this: I still believe in the future of Allentown, I still believe in the promise of our city, and I still believe that this can be a great city for us and our children. I still believe that Allentown can be that shining castle on the hill. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hyman. Next will be Mr.